get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to a special minisode episode of Thrive Loud here in the middle of FinTech Week. We've had so many great guests this week who are focused in financial technology, some amazing companies. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the few that have been before this interview and the next couple coming up in the next few days. And we figured right in the middle, if we're going to do FinTech Week, we needed to have the Godfather of FinTech. One of the early great episodes of Thrive Loud, we have the Ron Suber on with us, and he's here with us today. Ron, how are you today?
Lou, good morning. It's great to be back. What an exciting time, or what a scary time it is for many of your listeners in what's happening with FinTech around the world.
It certainly is, and let's make this into a conversation, Ron, because we want to catch up, I guess, with what you've been up to. It's been, believe it or not, over a year and a half since you've been on the show. And so much has happened in the space, but I want to catch up with you. I mean, I know you were traveling a lot, you were speaking, you're involved in lots of companies. Share with the listeners, let's do a little catch up, and then we'll chat a little bit about some of those scary things that are going on within the world of FinTech.
Well, since we spoke, Lou, I've joined the Ernst & Young National Entrepreneur of the Year judging team. I've become an advisor to the board and leadership team of House Canary and Money Lion and Quill. And I've literally been traveling the world, just back from Tokyo, London, Amsterdam, heading to Sydney in 2 weeks. Was in Atlanta 2 days ago and New York 2 weeks ago, really meeting with the biggest of the big incumbents, the tech firms, the banking firms, the insurance firms, explaining what happened, what's happening, and where all this is going. And what's very clear is that this is all changing at machine speed. It's no longer changing just at human speed. And look at the Fiserv First Data merger, the FIS WorldPay transaction, the AirWallex investment the other day, the Affirm partnership with Walmart, the Apple Goldman Sachs partnership, and the whole concept of the iBuyer, people buying real estate in a day instead of 2 months, and eliminating so much of that time and inefficiency and poor experience. It's truly fascinating what's happening on many, many levels.
I have to say that it's really interesting. I'm very familiar. We've been watching the Fiserv acquisitions and just the monstrosity that these companies are tapping into. I wanted to get your quick take on this. The actual means of payments these days is what's actually fascinating to me, because from the traditional credit card transactions that people have paid, obviously new forms of currency are popping up. Obviously, between the Venmos, the Zelles, and other means of payments, you tap into a little bit of that from your expertise and advisory services and overlooking. Do you see one emerging as a winner as everyone's fighting for wallet space?
Well, what's fascinating is in every innovation cycle, you have the early group, the literal advanced movers, first movers, and they rarely are the winners. They're really the companies in the first 5 to 10 years of the innovation cycle that stake out some ground. And then comes in this leading group in what's called the golden era, or the middle of an innovation era. And then the true winners emerge. And in payments, we are in the middle, right? We had PayPal and Square and some of these other payment providers come on and show the banks how it could have been done, should have been done by them. The banks then responded with the Zelle app, but gave the other payment groups literally a 7 and 8 year advance head start. And then you see what happened with Stripe. And then you see a lot of banks getting rid of their whole payment infrastructure and installing an Avid Exchange or other payment rail that helps them, given they couldn't rebuild what they had. And now you're starting to see the big banks say, all right, enough's enough, and starting to create all kind of payments, trade finance, invoice finance, and ways to move money in a very new way, trying to catch up with the challengers and not become irrelevant utilities. It's a fascinating time in payments.
I wanted to talk about FinTech from the younger generations. I'm using that because it's not just millennials anymore. It's also Gen Z. I know you have a strong familiarity with many of the student loan financing type of FinTech companies and where that space, which is just exploding. Share a little bit about some of your familiarity with this, because this is one area, and specifically in San Francisco where you're reaching from now, there's a ton of companies that are focused on that.
There sure are. What a great opportunity to help this young generation that's now saddled with $1.4 trillion of student loan debt. I was a very early investor in the equity and debt and securitizations of SoFi. Loved what they're doing. It was a balance sheet and securitization model, really bringing much of Wall Street to the tech world. So the finance part, and the tech. And now another model's emerged where banks are going directly to the fintechs and saying, here's what we want. Here's our pricing, credit, and risk and underwriting model and box. Bring us these students so we, the banks, can refinance these students out of their poor, high interest rate, long-term duration loans into something better. And so the banks can establish relationships. And that's why you've seen Credible.com go public, where I'm chairman of the board, and Common Bond and some other groups link up with the banks to be their fintech arm, to be their aggregator and group that brings them the customer, in addition to lead gen all the way down the pipeline, helping the banks get 99% of the way there. And then the fintechs like Credible hand off that student loan customer or mortgage customer to the banks. So the banks definitely want to get back involved in student lending, and they're using fintechs in many ways to get there, including Credible.com.
Ron, let's talk about this. What's the thing that nobody seems to know about yet, or what's the up and coming player or players or space within FinTech that you're keeping an eye on? Because what I do love about this is that you've managed to be involved from obviously the very traditional, from the bank side, from those that have been playing in the FinTech space for a little bit. They're mature companies and they're not that old, but even new things that are coming down the pike, things that you're seeing or areas and spaces that people are starting to explore more in FinTech.
So that's a great question. I ask myself that question very often. And one of the things I've come to realize and conclude, and many others are as well, is that this gig economy, these gig workers, people who don't have full-time jobs, that are not W-2 employees with a 1099, that don't get a paycheck every 2 weeks, and they don't have the cash flow that banks require to do lines of credits and credit cards and loans and mortgages. And so there's lots of opportunities to support gig workers. And we have a retirement crisis in the country. 24% of Americans entering retirement have zero saved, and another 25% have less than $50,000 saved. So we're going to see the gig economy expand, especially if there's a downturn where unemployment goes up and people need to become independent workers, whether it's Uber drivers or other parts of the gig economy. And so I've just invested in the equity and debt and an advisor to an exciting young company called Quill, QWIL, which helps these independent contractors and people in the gig economy manage their cash flows in a way, because the banks aren't serving them, and everybody knows credit cards are the wrong way to borrow. So I'm very excited about the opportunities to help and service this rapidly growing gig economy and the millions of people working in a new way.
I think this is great stuff, Ron. I want to give you the chance here. Other plugs, things that you're up to of late, things that we should know about, upcoming events or places, so that people can continue to connect with Ron Suber, who you're not only in the zone right now and must be so excited about all the things going on. I just want others to appreciate it as well. Maybe you can share what's going on in the world of Ron Suber.
Well, I've had a really fun year. I now have 24 investments in private companies. I'm advising 10 of them and chairman of the board of Credible. And I've started this credit lending fund where I'm helping companies with balance sheet and loan purchasing and lending, which has really been a great education. And you can really help people with debt financing and not just equity. but it's really meeting with young people and sharing the many, many mistakes I've made and really helping people articulate their own story. And we call that in a minute. And so I work with young people all around the world in helping them craft their story, their in a minute presentation about what makes them unique and what differentiates them. And so I've really enjoyed giving back, not just in the business world, but in the charitable world. And ReWirement is now almost 2 years old for me. It's not retirement, it's really ReWirement. And for me, that really was the concept of adjusting the jets and the engines of my life and not turning them off, but really just turning them down and finding this new orbit and equilibrium and traveling with my wife and meeting up with people and really just learning and sharing and helping people not make the same mistakes I've made.
Ron, this is the greatest segue I've ever done at Thrive Loud. I want to thank you for that because we've got your minisode episode right behind you, in which we'll feature into that part that you described about ReWirement, which will be what our listeners can hear back from that original chat. Ron, thank you again for coming on. This has been awesome. I know our listeners appreciate you on the show, and continue to Thrive Loud each and every day.
Lou, congrats on your continued success.
Well, thanks again. All right. To all the listeners out there, enjoy this minisode outtake from Ron's original interview on Thrive Loud. A little bit of ReWirement. What's the exciting part in this new role, this new chapter in your life?
So I'm in this chapter I call ReWirement, not retirement.
I like it.
Where I'm doing more of the things, truly doing more of the things that I enjoy and less of the things I didn't quite enjoy, perhaps long meetings and some other travel, and trying some new things. And so as an investor personally from my family office in 21 different companies and formally advising 7 companies and being on the board of one, I'm really able to see up close what's happening in payments, in how people invest and borrow and lend and save, store money and move money. And so I think what's exciting is that this next generation, this Gen X, Gen Y, and the millennials aren't doing anything the way we did or the generation before. Right. And so to see this young group now trust us as an industry and trust their mobile device to do their financial business. And you also see big companies like Amazon getting into business lending, and Alibaba and Tencent and JD and WeChat in Asia. What you're seeing happen in Singapore is remarkable, in invoice finance and some of these multi-country payments systems and solutions. And so what excites me is to see how fast we can change behavior and get acceptance by this next generation. I think what else excites me is the concept of financial inclusion. Mm-hmm. There are 1 billion people on the planet who didn't have a smart device, who weren't connected to the internet, who had no identity, let alone a financial identity. And there are companies, including Juvo, which just raised a large chunk of money from a leading VC, where I'm an investor and advisor, that the numbers are staggering, how they're able to help tens and hundreds of millions of people and link up with the incumbent banks, technology companies, and telecoms. To me, getting everyone on the planet connected 30 days a month with the ability to invest and borrow and save and connect to the web and get educated is very exciting.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.